Can you hear us in the back?
Can everyone hear us?
Can you turn it up a bit?
It's not. No.
Closer to the mouth? Yeah, okay, good. Welcome everyone to this session. We are both super excited about this. Next to me is John Anderson, Executive Director of Wikimedia Sweden. I'm not going to pronounce it in the Swedish way, I'm sorry. I'm Sandra, I work for the GLAM team at the Wikimedia Foundation, and we have been talking a lot the past months, where we've seen each other a lot, actually, and talking about this, and we are going to talk to you about an initiative that we have been, kind of...
I'm sorry, you're at the what team?
The GLAM team.
Go ahead,
Galleries,
thank you.
libraries, archives, museums.
Yeah.
Actually, yes.
It's still kind of hard to hear, especially with the noise in the room.
Oh, good. Okay. Should we close the window? Or...
That works.
Door
Maybe
for...
something can be turned up there.
Yeah.
I don't think there are any knobs we can reach.
Oh, here. No idea. I will just keep it closer to my mouth.
Thank you.
One caveat that we want to give is that this presentation, as we also stated on the Wikimania Wiki, is mostly intended for people who have been in the Wikimedia movement for a while, so it assumes that you already know a bit about our chapters and also the movement strategy process that is going on. So if you don't know that background very well, some things may sound a little bit fake. That's just a warning. But if you want to have more input about that, you can come to us later. But what we are going to do in the upcoming hour together here, both John and I for half an hour will explain to you a new initiative that we have been working on. We will start introducing the context of it, why we are talking about this. We want to talk about how we want to deal with governance of this initiative, about how we plan to work on it. Sounds very big, right? And then we will open up the floor actually for a full half an hour to your questions, comments, and any thoughts that you may have about what we are going to talk about. What we are doing is we are building, or we are thinking about an initiative that will provide a better technology infrastructure for content partnerships in the Wikimedia movement. And particularly content partnerships by what we call in our movement the GLAM Wiki community of practice. So in a narrow sense, that means collaborations with galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. But I have to say the scope is broader than that, and later in the presentation I will tell a bit more about the scope of what we want to do. We know that very well, both from the work that we do and what we see happening in the movement, is that content partnerships, GLAM Wiki partnerships are super popular in the Wikimedia movement. Many of our communities do these kinds of partnerships. The communities themselves are interested in it because cultural heritage is a universal topic that anywhere in the world people are super interested in. And that has actually resulted in more than 10 years of work by our communities on Wikimedia Commons, on Wikipedia. And that has resulted in that we can actually safely say that almost 10% of the files on Wikimedia Commons have been contributed there through some kind of partnership with an organization that deals with cultural heritage in the broadest sense. Large parts of Wikidata, large parts of Wikisource also, were contributed through content partnerships. So for our movement, this is a very important thing. We also see that our communities, our chapters, our affiliates are being approached a lot by content partners, by museums, archives, knowledge organizations in their own context. And these organizations are interested in using Wikimedia platforms as access and engagement platforms. So there's really a strong interest in this topic from both sides. But the technical situation, the technical infrastructure that is currently used to support these partnerships, like more large-scale contributions to our projects, batch uploads, batch editing, is not ideal. In that sense that people have been doing these collaborations for a long time with actually awesome tools, I have to say, but most of them are built by volunteers. Most of them are, ad hoc, often solutions like, okay, hey, we have this need, we will build something. We will build, a volunteer says, I will build a prototype, I will build a tool, and people then do uploads with this tool, and people can get around. But we don't really have a sustainable situation for these tools. Often you see that they are supported by only one or a few volunteers, which means that Of course, everyone is free to do what they like, or things can happen when that volunteer for some reason moves on or something else happens. A tool may be abandoned. We see a lot of interesting tools that don't really have maintainers anymore. Many tools also have high learning curves. They are sometimes poorly documented. And many of them are also external to our platforms. One thing that I see a lot is that for many of you, so many of these tools that you see here on the left will be familiar. I see a lot that many members in our communities, many volunteers in our communities just don't know that anything like quick statements, petty pen, that even exists. They are not even aware that it exists because these tools are not visible from our platform, are not directly, accessible from the workflows that they have. Sometimes they are only known by expert users. So that's a situation in the GlamWiki community that we've been talking about a lot. We need a more sustainable solution for these important partnerships that we do, and how can we do that? So what we've been cooking up together is what we are going to do is do a one-year investigation across the Wikimedia Foundation fiscal year. So that's why the strange, July 2019 till June 2020 time frame is there. We are going to team up to start addressing this issue and to start thinking about how to do this. And how, I will leave that up to John. John will actually talk more about how we think about it from the context of the movement strategy and governance, and then I will also talk a bit about how we think about it from the technical perspective.
So yes, thank you, Sandra. Can you all hear me? Perfect.
Yeah.
So I would like to take a few minutes just to explain why this initiative is happening right now and how the context has affected our planning to date. As some of you might know, or hopefully most of you know, the Wikimedia movement is currently planning to kind of redefine itself and developing a really quite bold strategy on what we will be focusing on up until 2030 and what we should aim to become. The strategic direction, it says, by 2030, Wikimedia will become the essential infrastructure of the ecosystem of free knowledge, and anyone who shares our vision will be able to join us. And to aim to become infrastructure, that kind of means that the Wikimedia movement want to take a larger role in society and ensure that whatever we build and what we deliver over time should be functioning so that anyone that wants to use our tools and the things that we have developed, they know that it will be accessible and available and working when they need to use it, just like any other type of infrastructure. That anyone who shares our vision can join us with the focus on the importance to be an open, inclusive, and a diverse movement. That is something quite bigger than it currently is. This, in our opinion, and in our interpretation of this, also indicates that other actors will be able to receive support from the Wikimedia movement, and that we, as a movement, intend to grow, and that we need to actively work to make this happen. And our belief is that, as Wikimedia Sweden ED, my belief is that the investments that we do from now on will all be in line with this strategic direction. All the major investments that we do should help to fulfill this goal. So that's why we have now decided to start with this initiative and look into how we can do this together. As you might know, there are a number of working groups that have been tasked on developing recommendations for how we can reach the strategic direction, and how we can become this infrastructure, and how we can ensure that anyone can join us. And what we've seen when we read the recommendations, and have, I'm also in one of the working groups as myself, is that there are a number of recommendations that are focusing on the decentralization of the movement. That not everything should be handled by one single body, but which is currently the Wikimedia Foundation, but that ownership should be shared across a multitude of different actors across our movement, across the world. Of course, this is something that has a large implication on who will be doing what in our movement. The other trend that we have seen is that there is a need that a lot of the work groups are pointing to the need to be a common framework, and that support is given through capacity building and joint structures. And it might sound a little bit like there is a conflict between decentralization and building a common framework, but what is envisioned in a lot of these working groups is that these actors, these new organizations, or the organizations get more possibilities of having more power and more independence, so that they can take a leading role in developing these kind of framework within a specific thematic area, for example, and help developing the supporting materials and help developing the methods and structures that is needed, not just for their organization, but across the movement. So many of the working groups, they are suggesting to develop some kind of organization that take a leading role with a specific area of expertise, and that will help move Wikimedia as a movement, not just as individual organizations, forward within a given thematic area. This has been called thematic hubs, center of excellence, center of expertise. The working groups have different names for it, but it kind of shows up over and over again. And this initiative here is a pilot trying to see how we can actually implement this in the coming year, as the recommendations now are becoming much more clear and much more concrete. So what could this look like then? What we want to start investigating is how this could be structured, how it could be financed, how it could be coordinated, how it could be governed. And what we learn will be documented and shared so that the knowledge gained from the work we do here in the first research year will allow other organizations in the movement to follow suit. So the intent is to kind of create a blueprint of sort so that others can follow without having to invest as much. What we want to look into is, can Wikimedia Sweden find a new role in the movement that is accepted and supported by other movement actors? A role where we can help develop local community capacity across the world so that not everyone has to start from scratch. And the goal is that the work we do ensures that more content can be added to the platforms and it becomes more diversified. So the investment we make, they should all help to reduce barriers so that more people can take part. And this is kind of the basic assumption that underpins this approach. An interesting part that we will be looking at quite a lot during the year is to how the decision-making system will look like. How, if any organization has the role of coordinating within a thematic area, how is that, how is that decided what to focus on? How can different free knowledge actors, help prioritize and decide what should be focused on? We believe really strongly that co-ownership is central for this. Any shape or form this will take, there need to be other actors that can be actively participating and give inputs and help decide about the path forward. So we put a lot of effort into how we can achieve that. That's a core central part of what we'll be doing this year. The other thing we'll be looking at is, what we hope to achieve with all of this. If we find a model for this blueprint, is to what we hope to achieve is to create a network of affiliates that around the world that can serve as kind of a node of expertise that will allow for more community engagement and for providing specialized knowledge and capabilities. As you know, there's been a lot of great work done by the GlamWiki community over the years. And as Sandra mentioned, we have had when we're talking about GLAM, we're not really just talking about the typical institutions, galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, but we also want to include other types of content owners, such as private collections, bottom-up initiatives, or community archives, and so forth. They will also have a very strong and important role in a lot of societies as content owners and preserving cultural heritage. But we believe that there are still a lot of things that, even though there's been a lot of great work happening in the GlamWiki community, we believe there's still a lot of work that still needs to be happening, and especially if we want to be able to scale this across the world in the way that we all envision that should happen. We believe that there is a need to develop infrastructure and tools for large-scale content contribution, and this is this is what we will talk mostly about during this presentation, how to get to that part of the settled and working. But after that, after we have an idea on how to build the tools more efficiently and provide the tools for different organizations and how to focus on that, we also need to figure out how we can couple this with community training, with sustainable financial resources, with documentation and networking support. This is what we call the techno-social service environment for collaboration. So this is all the things that comes around. Even if we have a functioning tool, how do we make sure that people can actually use it in a good way and efficiently use it to form new partnerships? So developing, these kind of next steps. First, start to build tools. That will happen quite soon. Then, the whole other part of the techno-social environment. That is something we'll have to start envisioning during the year, together with all of you. Just a little bit of background why we are the ones looking into this currently, why we care about this very deeply. Wikimedia Sweden, as an organization, we've worked for 12 years with different partnerships with GLAM institutions. We have a lot of experience both working with Swedish GLAM institutions, both large and small. And we also have a number of global partnerships with institutions that are not just in Sweden, but such as UNESCO and Europeana that are doing a lot of really interesting things. And we have been working quite closely with them over the years to see how we can find a path together and what kind of the different needs we have, or the shared needs that we have. And the last few years, we have also in Sweden developed a small team of developers that has a technical capability to support the GLAM institutions with the tools and workflows. They are developers. They know MediaWiki really well. They know how to build upload tools. They know how to build APIs and much more. And we have invested quite heavily on making sure that our developers, that they understand the Wikimedia community really well. This is something that's extremely crucial for us. If we don't invest in that now, we will build the wrong kind of tools. So we have a small team, our core team, but we're hoping to scale that. We have also worked quite deeply with Wikimedia Foundation, as Sandra was mentioning in the beginning of the presentation, especially around the structured data on commons work. And we've together identified a number of opportunities and overlapping interests. And we already know each other really well thanks to this work. We've had a project called Finding GLAMs going on for the last year, which is where we developed a number of case studies where we outline different areas where there are specific needs due to lack of technology or lack of documentation, or there are no clear agreement within our movement on how to organize the work. So these are like some of the areas, the practical areas we think we've been working on that we think are quite important to take this work forward. In the context of Sweden, we also have the good possibility of, there's a lot of external grants possible to find. There's a lot of opportunity funding from grants from Sweden or grants from European Union or other kind of support from different actors. So we think that can be a good approach of getting more research into the movement. By having this kind of larger scale focus, we can also actively work together with joining in partnership with different Wikimedia affiliates to develop joint projects. So we can, in that way, bring in more funds to the movement. And in Sweden, we have done that for quite a few years now. We have around half of our yearly budget comes from these external grants. So we have experience of applying for different kind of grants. When it comes to the Wikimedia Foundation, we have Sandra and the team at the community engagement team. They are very skilled and knowledgeable around international. They have a lot of international connections and have a lot of community expertise. And they are also very involved in investigating what the needs are among GLAM actors across the world. And yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought this was going to be a technical session. Maybe I'm in the wrong place.
There will be, Sandra will join with all the technical work, yeah.
All right. For example, structured data and commons, I'm interested in that, but I'm interested in Wikidata, and I don't know how structured data, commons, and Wikidata relate. Are you going to get into that kind of stuff?
No.
Are you going to get into APIs? What technology are you going to get into?
We are going into that. We are building a trajectory for building technology for cultural
I
collaborations.
think it's specific about technology.
But isn't it on another session, a GLAM session? Wikidata for Wikimedia.
Yeah, I know about that one. Yeah.
No, this is really a community-focused session that is about, I think it's actually important for Internet Archives to know about this because you are a stakeholder in this.
Okay.
Just saying.
What is interesting here for us, of course, working with Wikimedia Foundation, is that they are the ones responsible for the MediaWiki software development. So coordinating with them, of course, is crucial for any activity such as this. If we start building MediaWiki software, building larger style tools that are integrated in MediaWiki, there needs to be an understanding between our teams and the Wikimedia Foundation's teams to ensure that everything works smoothly. To ensure that this is also a priority within their teams. So far, we've done a number of things in preparation for this. We have developed a number of case studies over the last couple of years, where we have, first of all, the Structured Data Commons team. They have worked on developing case studies around the more typical GLAM wiki collaborations, for example, uploading files from the collection of an art museum or on the upload of a private book collection. While in the Finding GLAMs project, we worked on a number of case studies that are more on the edge cases or more experimental. For example, how we can upload images or audio files, sound audio files, recording from a performance, for example, and couple that with images from that performance and the note sheets, for example, and how that can all be connected on the wiki platforms. Or, for example, how if we have collections from GLAM historical collections from GLAM institutions that have a lot of racist content, for example, how we can handle that and ensure that that is not spread in a bad way on our platforms, through our platforms. For example, a third example is uploading interpreters, dictionaries, and adding them as themes to Wikidata. So why we think these case studies are important and relevant to talk about is that this kind of gives us a good foundation for the work that we're aiming to do now. And it should allow us to work more easily and start quite fast with this work. We know it's a lot of research that needs to be done still, and this is something that Sandra's team will be doing, especially around what is needed in the global south. So we know we are just getting started, but we're not starting from scratch. So, and we can hand over to Sandra to talk more about the technical specifics.
Yeah, I will give a quick overview of how we are currently thinking about the scope, also the technical scope, and indeed a bit more about the research that we plan to do this year and what we intend to produce by June 2020. First, circling back on the scope, for who are we going to develop things? Our current thinking is that
Hold on. So should somebody be scribing this to an Etherpad?
we will share the slides, of course, but I think the discussion afterwards is good to have on Etherpad, yes. Yeah. That would be great, actually, if people would volunteer to make notes of that. But yeah, and all this stuff will eventually also go on Wiki. But how we are thinking now, how we are making sense of the audiences is that we will have we are thinking of three categories of partnerships that we want to build for and work with. The first one is large-scale organizations. Think about the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Europeana. They usually have advanced digital infrastructure. They come to Wikimanias, they have a lot of money themselves actually, and they express their needs quite clearly. They want advanced things like round-tripping their data continuously with our platforms, stuff like that. Systemic partners is how we call them, partners that want to work with us on an ongoing basis, that actually want to have continued inclusion with our platforms. We are, however, aware that this is in fact only a small slice of what GlamWiki work and partnership work is about. A much bigger part is the smaller scale organizations. The majority of organizations dealing with content around the world that want to partner with us are small scale ones, often with not much digital infrastructure. These are super important. They also probably have more of the content that we consider part of the knowledge gaps that we want to address. And the third category that is close to my own heart is what we call the non-institutional partnerships. There's a lot of bottom-up work across the world happening by our communities that is actually, kind of driven by the communities themselves, with very small-scale community archives, private collections, etc. So these two are super important for us as well. So we don't want to build for the big ones, but also very much for the smaller ones. So emphasizing here, we want to make this into a global initiative that serves global needs, not just the needs of the big players. And also about scope again, when we talk about the GlamWiki community of practice, we also think about it in a broad sense. We also include partnerships with universities, research institutions, NGOs, etc. as being part of that. So it's broader than just strictly cultural heritage. Who do we consider at this moment the users for this infrastructure? At first, of course, all the volunteers, affiliate staff, GlamWiki organizers, partnership organizers who will do the partnerships on the ground. The community members also, who maybe are not involved in the partnerships per se, but who will see the content, use the content on Wikimedia projects. That's the second use of a group of users. The third group of users, of course, the content partners themselves. At this moment, we see that many content partners are skilled enough to do things by themselves, but they just don't find their way around our tools, our tooling ecosystem. Some of them do, some of them don't. And we want to give, if appropriate, more agency to them. And of course, fourthly, also reusers of the content, providing them with better means to reuse anything they are interested in. And we have also in this area already done a bit of groundwork. What you see here is a schema of a result of the Structured Data Commons work that is in fact like a workflow of how content partnerships usually are taking place, which gives a distinction between you have the process of preparing content, the process of uploading content, the process after uploading content, enrichment, and then evaluation, impact measurement. Just showing this that we already have some frameworks to think about this. And so within that, we see 3 problem spaces. The first one is broadly around increasing the access to the materials, so the entire phase of helping institutions to make their materials available on our platforms. Selection of materials, which ones are copyrighted, which ones are not, making sure that that the format is appropriate for our platforms, uploading, dealing with new kinds of materials as well, that we are not familiar with in content and formats, and more easy ways to integrate different Wikimedia platforms at once. With Structured Data and Commons now, we already see that suddenly people have to use both Commons and Wikidata. So it's not just working on one Wikimedia project anymore, it's working on multiple Wikimedia projects, and we want to think about making these workflows easier. And also providing ways to make reuse easier, as I said earlier. A second large problem space is the enrichment. As soon as content from partnerships is on our projects, we know that our communities have a lot of potential, a lot of knowledge around the world to help enrich this content, give it better information, tell about the photo where it was taken, things like that. But there are 2 problems at the moment. That in the big sea of information, in the 50 millions of files on Commons, for instance, our community has problems just finding the things that need work. There's not really a way to find these, so that's an area where we can help. And also, of course, many of these tasks are done by volunteers. These people have limited time, so are there ways in which we can make their work easier? Maybe there can be some gamification, which some of our volunteer developers are already doing a lot of work about. But many of these ideas that are already out there for making these enrichments easier is something that we can make more sustainable. The third problem space is super important for our partners. Actually, it's crucial to convince partners to come to Wikimedia platforms, to work with Wikimedia platforms, and to stay with Wikimedia platforms, that they can demonstrate why they do it, what is the impact of that. Super important aspect of content partnerships is helping them to show, how often their content is being reused, how many views it gets, and we can help them by providing better statistics, sustainable statistics platforms, visualizations, showcases of their own contributions, etc. So research that we are planning for the upcoming year, and John already mentioned some of that, is we of course are going to look very closely at the existing tools landscape. So the slide with all the tools that you see, we already did a lot of that for Commons, for Structured Data and Commons, but we will look at it more broadly to see, which tools are used very often, which features are really needed, where are the gaps. We are also going to go back on this month in GLAM and other kinds of reporting all through all the years that are documented, to have to analyze what has happened over the years. So we are going to do a big mapping task, looking at over the years what kind of partnerships have our communities done, which technologies have they used, so that we see patterns in there as well. And apart from that, we know that we have major gaps around the world. We know that there are many regions around the world that we don't know super well how partnerships can work there, what are the hurdles there. So we also want to invest in specific pieces of research in regions that we don't know very well yet. And then Wikimedia Sweden itself is also going to research on the best way to grow a team, and also grow technical capacity for such an initiative, but also so that other movement actors can learn from that. And what will we end up with in a year from now? Firstly, we want to end up with a technical direction. First, we called it a roadmap, but that's not a good word, because we don't want it to be totally set in stone yet. But what we want to end up with is at least a list of priorities of what we want to start working on in the first period. And of course, with a system of having flexible reflection on that and ability to change, but we want to have a direction where we want to go. A research report that summarizes all the research that we have done. Of course, also all the conversations that we've had about growth of this initiative, governance around it, evaluation, the sustainability of it, we will also report on that. And by mid-2020, super important, we want to have a formalized agreement for financing this between the Wikimedia Foundation and Wikimedia Sweden. so that there is a baseline of funding that is certain over the period of several years with which we can build this in starting from 2020. And that in addition, as John says, we can find additional funding sources from various international funding agents. By that time also the team at Wikimedia Sweden will already have grown, which is great. And depending on funding also, we hope already to have done some piloting. So not just only research, although we find the research very important in all the conversations we are going to have next year, we also hope to start piloting already. So how to get involved? We're almost there. Of course, we're here at the conference, so please find us in person and talk to us. If you want to have more private, remarks about this, you can email us. Right after Wikimania, we will also publish this initiative on Meta. We will give it its own project page with talk page, etc., and that will start to become the hub of what is going to happen here. And of course, here we still have 25 minutes for all kinds of questions and discussion from you. Maybe a first question for you is whether everything from our presentation was clear, and if there are clarifying questions people want to know more. Andre?
Just would anyone be willing to take on note taking? So I'm taking internal notes for our team so we can capture all of the stuffy stuff. There's someone doing actual notes, so we're great.
The Etherpad is probably linked from the...
Yes.
Awesome, thank you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Before we start the questions.
So, was everything clear? Any clarifications needed? We were crystal clear. Yes, Magnus?
Maybe for once something non-technical, but because I ran into that issue just on navigation in Greece. What I saw there was quite a lot of museums, but many of them are very small. They have government funding in terms of, they pay for the room, but it's literally a room with a fan.
Yes.
And some glass cabinets, and
Yep.
there's some volunteers sitting there because they didn't get any funding for personnel. I would have been hard pressed to find someone to actually talk to about doing something, because the volunteer just looks at no one and steals stuff. I think a lot of work needs to go through the local chapters
Yes.
in the countries, to map what's actually there, because in the UK we have every mom and pop museum on the net, but in Greece I think there's lots of things that no one really knows about. They have no internet presence, nothing.
Yeah.
And maybe they're on Google Maps, but it's A, map, and B, find someone to talk to in the local language, with the local context, to get something started there.
Absolutely. I mean, in the project Finding Glams that I mentioned, that is the scope of that project is to kind of start getting the basic information about what museums are out there in the archives and libraries. Just collect the basic information, we actually know who we can reach out to in the future. But I definitely agree with. I mean, there are such differences also between the institutions, or the broader sense of a GLAM, their capacities and what they will need, which is, that is a large part of the research to kind of figure that out and see what if any tools they would need. If they have no digitization project, what can we do then? What can the Wikimedia movement do to support? If they don't have an intention of digitizing at this point, they might not be the ones to start with, of course. But that is a lot of thinking that has to go into that. And I think, as you point out, to work with the local Wikimedia affiliates is going to be a crucial part of that. Does that answer your question?
I can see the sense in having a localization in one place to get things to make conversation and movement much easier. But on the other hand, how will you go on achieving an international perspective?
Yeah, I think partly covered by the research. Of course, we also intend to have a lot of conversations in the upcoming year within all the community conferences that are going on. It is part of what we are investigating next year, basically. So I cannot say we really have a very concrete idea at this moment yet, but it should definitely be included in. Definitely in all the mapping that we want to do in the research. That is a big part of that. And on the other hand, the conversations of the upcoming year.
I very much think to echo a bit what Magnus says, you do need to involve chapters.
I can guarantee that John is super, super conscious about that.
Yeah, and I mean, as I mentioned in my part of the presentation about the governance, this is, how, because this is new to the movement, right, that anyone takes on a larger technical responsibility like this outside of the Wikimedia Foundation. I mean, we have Wikimedia Deutschland doing Wikidata, the groundbreaking part that they've been doing there, so we're learning a lot from them, of course. I think there's a lot of learnings how they have been activating the community and the other affiliates by having dedicated staff to organize specific conferences and activities such as this. This is something we still need to discuss with, see what kind of funding opportunities we will have in Sweden to do these kind of things, but it's definitely something we will actively investigate, and I think it's a crucial part. I mean, cooperation with different affiliates will not just come because we present something on Meta, right? There will have to be a very, very active approach from us to both invite specific, dedicated people that are actively working with this ongoingly and have both for conversation and physical meetings and, hackathons and a number of different activities that comes. This is this techno-social environment that we talked about. So that is like, for me, this is now this first year. I mean, we will do research to see what needs we don't know about yet. We will do form a technical or expand the technical team in Sweden, our capacity to build bigger things, because we need more. We have 3 developers currently. I mean, we know that's not enough to build the type of tools that we need. So we have to expand a bit. And then, in parallel with that, all the time talking with the affiliates to see get the priorities down for the first year, but then also finding a better structure on how to ongoingly get inputs and decide on different priorities. If we have one affiliate needing one thing and another needing something else, which one do we pick? And how is that choice being made? We don't know that yet, but that's something that is part of the first year research. Did I answer your question?
Pretty much.
Magnus?
Two more things come to mind. So one of them is besides Media Commons, I think the big let's call it dumping ground for museum images is or used to be Flickr. Flickr has kind of shot itself in the foot with the recent limitations and other things.
Yeah.
So I think there's an opportunity for Commons to establish itself as the primary address for that. But I think for that, especially for the medium-sized institutions, so one thing is I think they need some assurances. So, like, for example, we need some mechanism on Commons to make sure that these files are not deleted by someone who says, oh, I don't know if the Sumerian statue is still under copyright, let's better delete it just to be sure. I think that's one thing, just to give them not control, but a sense of permanence and a sense of being taken seriously and I don't know, respected in a way, and not just all subsumed into the Wikiverse. The other thing from the probably small end, so we've been talking a lot about Commons is maybe a bit too I don't know, the upload process is a bit formal and too I don't want to say stuffy, but for someone who has, oh, my grandfather had a shoot box with photos from really interesting photos from, I don't know, ethnical Africa, funky or something. But yeah, no, I can't label all of them and this at least not in one go. Because I have them on this, I just want to upload them, and then once they're up there, we can I can label them maybe, but there will be an easier way to get to that. Is there any thought about having a staging area for these things where you can put things, maybe optimizing, and then once they're in a decent state, put them on Commons?
So regarding the first question around the possibility for Commons to become more of a hub now, Flickr has stopped being that perhaps, or at least reduced their attractiveness. That's something we've observed as well, and I think it's there is a strong need especially among smaller institutions across the world, or smaller content holders across the world, that they need somewhere, they might even have get money to digitize that collection, but they don't have money to actually make it accessible afterwards. So there is a hard drive standing in basements across the world, you know, at different museums and archives, with digitized content that they want to share with the world, but they don't have the money to, you know, have the website up, basically, which is, you know, really, really sad. And Commons, I mean, I do think it has potential to become something like that. I mean, but it's also, you know, everything from how do we visualize the museum so they actually, you know, they get the visibility. If Commons, you know, if it's only a category and a landing page on Commons, if that's all they get, it's hard to convince them that this is a great place for them to host a lot of, or be the main point for them to host the material. So that's something we have to look at. Solving the you know, deletionist way on Commons, that is something that is of course have to be done with the communities, or alternatively have some kind of middle layer. This is something we also need to look into and see what the community thinks about. Well, kind of like, you know, you call it a staging area, with your second question. Is that something that people find acceptable, and how would that process be? Both to go through that content, improve it if you're missing the data, for example, and then actively pushing the Commons. That kind of infrastructure really need a big commitment on the foundation side, rather than from Wikimedia Sweden side. So I cannot really answer if that's a likely outcome, but it's definitely something we will investigate and see if there can be if there's a strong need identified that we see from many GLAM actors that actually would use this service if we would provide it, then something to continue discussing about.
Can you put the slides on? Actually, I have a reflection that I thought was not maybe out of the focus of the current topic, but Magnus's comments relate to that directly. Can you put the workflow slide you had?
I don't know where it was.
It went to sleep, I guess. So, unplug that. Because I also think that and now it's coming. But it's on the other screen. So. Yeah. Can you get to this? I can't see my arrow. No, but this was the workflow when enrichment and all this sheet. Yeah, this one. I was also thinking that actually here, and it relates directly to what Magnus said, that the first task is clarifying copyright status.
Yes.
But this is one of the most complicated tasks. And it's actually should be in a way in this section either. It's about the enrichment. That actually, and this collection, the copyright status is so messy, and if Commons is only for only for pictures which are openly licensed and with clear copyright status, then it is such a limitation to actually be able to use this content and to also actually clarify the copyright status. So this is, I think, a very, very important thing to think about, and I totally agree with the need to have a space for unclear copyright status material.
Yeah. So, and just to follow up on that, I think there's two things here. One is it would be for the foreign institution. I think it would be undoubtedly easier to say, okay, we upload everything here,
yes.
but we don't have to. Some of it can be copyrighted, but it's only in the first instance it's only visible to us and maybe MediaWiki Foundation people. And there we can say, we can annotate a bit, and then we can say, oh, these are copyright free or CC BY or whatever. And then we can upload those in a batch, and then later we find, oh yeah, these are actually free as well, and then we.
But I think that this copyright clearance process really needs more people to see it in order to get the attributions. The information might be missing, but somehow you get the attribution, and you the copyright has expired, and then this is actually public domain. But if you keep it to like closed circle only, the process is much more tedious and takes much more time.
Yeah, and the other aspect, I think some people have advocated in the past for non-free commons, so that pictures that are under copyright or potentially under copyright can be posted there with permission. So that might overlap with this.
Actually, in the current movement strategy draft recommendations from the diversity group, there's a recommendation to allow and non-commercial and no derivatives content on Commons. Now, of course, the community is rebelling against that, but this could be an idea to start thinking about this in a different way, so I really like it. Mark, you were first.
Yeah, so, I mean, maybe everyone in this room already knows this, but if you do want to store stuff, the Internet Archive offers unlimited storage for free. And you can put anything you want there. There are APIs available. People upload up to millions of things there, gigabytes of stuff, etc. So there's APIs coming into it as well as coming out of it. And I'm available to talk about anything relative to the Internet Archive if you want to.
So I mean that could
That's
be
why I asked you to say.
so I mean that could be a very interesting workflow as well to see look into how I mean Internet Archive or any other actors that feel that they have that kind of responsibility, how to or put out something ourselves. All things to look into. Very good points. I think the
One of the things we do in Wikidata is now Wikidata comments. That's when we have pictures with unclear or a very clear negative copyright status. We still can document those pictures in Wikidata. So when Commons is the repository where the actual pictures are, it doesn't follow that the Wikidatification is owned by Commons, far from it actually. Because in the same way, now we focus on the Wikidatification of Commons on the pictures in Commons, but there is a similar need for Wikidatification of the fair use pictures in English Wikipedia. And that gets you straight away to a similar problem. In English Wikipedia there is still a massive amount of pictures that should be in Commons because the license is clear. It is free license because it has expired or what have you. So by Wikidatification of fair use pictures in English, you will also get that as a fringe benefit.
good point as well. Big proposal.
First, can I just support Magus's idea for a staging idea area where you can do work in progress and where you can control who else has access to that. That's really important. On a completely separate point, a lot of the Foundation's efforts in this space in the past seem to have been there's a real magnetism for monolithic top to bottom solutions. Maybe GlamWiki Toolkit's an example of that. Other things. Whereas the things that have probably had the most impact are levels of infrastructure. Magnus's quick statements or PyWikibot or something like that. So with the collaboration, with the research and assessment going forward, how do you see the balance of those things? Obviously the monolith, the big solutions that say, here's an entire process for taking your spreadsheet and creating the metadata and all the description pages and everything in one go is very useful, but it's really nice if you can separate out all the couplings to try and make each layer of infrastructure things that people can plug in maybe their own command line based tools into without necessarily having to use the monolithic application. So is that, are you looking at both sorts, the top, the vertical monolith and the horizontal layers?
Maybe not, well, I can speak for myself, maybe not in that framing. How I think of it is probably that we have to go towards a very modular way of working, where we don't build one monolithic thing that solves this entire problem, but probably think about smaller modules that can be fit together in a flexible way.
I mean, both smaller modules that can be fitted together, but also, making sure that they have a unified.
Sure they can be fitted
They
together.
can be fitted together and that are unified in how they look and feel, and so and properly documented. So it's, again, like reducing the barriers and making sure it's easier to maintain, because they follow the same kind of logic in there. How they've been built.
But the technology that's been most useful doesn't have a look and feel because it's an infrastructure layer. It's a command line or it's an API.
So I think we can have the best of both worlds there. If well, monolith or official application, or whatever you want to call it, A, it uses an API, and B, that API is well documented and lets you work under, I don't know, username, bot name, whatsoever. So then you can have the official solution, and you can have people working against that API, doing their own solutions for maybe some fringe users, or maybe even some separate project doing that.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, it should be very clear that this is not an intent to like take over all the things to do. We know that is not possible. It would not be something that would be positive either. The idea is to, when we have tried and tested a few things that we know works well, thanks to the work by volunteers, how we can integrate that in a more unified approach. There's going to be, thousands of edge cases. There's going to be a lot of things that still need development, a lot of testing going around. So, I mean, having the APIs working properly so it's easy to do that is important. Key. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to add support to the staging area idea, because that's the kind of thing that a single volunteer tool builder couldn't accomplish. That's a kind of systemic thing that takes changes to Commons itself. And by the way, the main use case may be museums and collection owners, but really every Commons contributor could benefit from a dashboard or something where they could find out something that was deleted and would be notified properly, and they would have some resolution center to deal with, etc.
Yeah. I will use it heavily.
I think Sandra, did you raise your hand?
Sorry?
No. Right?
No.
Okay. No. Magnus, please.
So I think one thing that you briefly mentioned, I think that kind of follows up from some of the things we talked about, is presentation. So for medium and especially small size contributors, one main benefit would be they could get an internet presence for free that is well maintained, that is multilingual, that is findable. So for that, we need some presentation, as you said, more than a category tree. And that should, if we do dream scenario, also include files that are made available publicly but not under a free license. So that should seamlessly merge those two into one view. The thing is, so everything right now runs through MediaWiki because that's what we do. But I think it should be allowed to ask the question: is MediaWiki the right thing for that kind of presentation? Because what is this art presenting tool for Kronos?
Kronos,
yeah. So I think that's a very nice example of a presentation for images, artwork that is separate from MediaWiki, but relies on its infrastructure. So maybe there is a scope for I don't know, Wiki Glens or Wiki Museums or whatever you want to call it, a site that does not use MediaWiki because it's aimed primarily at viewers and researchers, but not so much at editors, and that can of course link back to Commons and Wikidata and everything else. But as a nice presentation site.
We have only 2 minutes, but I would like to try to respond to that because I think this is a very interesting part of this discussion is, what is the role of the Wikimedia movement when it comes to knowledge saving? Should we host unfree content on our service? Should we invest in that? I mean, it's going to be, if we're talking about, over the years, billions of images even that are unfree, hosted by the Wikimedia movement. Are we the right owners of that infrastructure, or should it be in partnership with Internet Archive or others that have maybe a broader focus, a scope than just the limited to the free knowledge? So I think that's a bigger discussion to take in a group. I think that having that as part of the basic foundation, we'll continue looking now at, or the basic layer to look into as part of going forward with this research. I think that's super important. I think I think there's going to be a lot of discussion and community consultation to see if that is something that is relevant for the Wikimedia movement to own completely, or if it's shared ownership.
When you truly start thinking in collaborating with Internet Archive, they can have a Wikibase representing the content that they have, and when it is a Wikibase, it is internationalized, so it's available in any and all languages, and from that it will also become super easy to integrate and interoperate, and if anything, if we are to be serious, interoperation is going to be so vitally important.
Okay, is there any more last question? Let's wrap up.
It's curious to know, talking about decentralized developed tools and also foundation developed tools. I'm wondering, have you given any thought to a threshold where something becomes a central piece of infrastructure that's been developed by the community, and there's a need to adopt it and give it more support, and how you would approach that?
Yeah. For me, that goes into the question that I talked about, the prioritization. You know, how, I mean, I think it would be unreasonable to think that Wikimedia Sweden, even if we're the ones building the tools, would be the one deciding about that. You know, that has to be a process that involves a lot more stakeholders from the movement and also from from the GLAM community. How that process is going to look like, that is, I see that as one of the major things I'll be working on the next year. And I will be contacting all of you about that to see different solutions, different possible structures that could happen. That could
But to be clear, you do see that such a process could end up in Wikimedia Sweden, for example, taking over the maintenance of a tool that is deemed
absolutely, yeah,
strategic.
absolutely. So the hope is that if there's a tool that turns out to be absolutely needed to continue GLAM partnerships, to bring that into the mix, the larger tool set as a module that can be plugged in. I think that is the future we envision. Kind of, yeah. So, thank you for clarifying. Thank you.